mother asked me, why are you daydreaming in class? And my father, well, he just crosses his arm and shakes his head in disappointment. My parents are not happy. I mean, being smart is literally the only thing I had going for me. I'm short, I'm fat, and I have no friends except for my sister, who really does like me. But I suspect if I wasn't her only brother, maybe she wouldn't like me quite as much. On top of this, I am the epitome of a mama's boy. Since second grade and now the beginning of third, I develop a tummy ache and ask to call my mother every day to try and get her to pick me up and bring me home. She tells me she will try and get off work early and ask if I can be a big boy and make it until the end of the day in case for some reason she can't make it. I believe with all my heart that she will pick me up, even though she never does. My teacher makes fun of me and says, your stomach wouldn't hurt so much if you weren't so fat. I know it seems cruel. Teachers were allowed to be honest in the 70s. They could even paddle you, which I would find out later. What I learned is being mediocre is far more challenging than being smart. There's a lot to navigate. I mean, mediocre students are loud and distracting, unlike smart students who are quiet and focused. Mediocre students have fun. I'm seated next to a young boy with blonde hair and the biggest, most beautiful brown eyes I've ever seen. Not only can he not sit still, he seems to cherish the attention of everyone in the room. When the teacher's back is turned, he is on stage. But the minute she turns around, he purses his lips and looks down at his paper as if he's working on his assignment. The teacher can't figure it out. Who's causing all the giggling? But she strongly suspects it's him. It's clear. But he can't be caught. He is the ultimate class clown with impeccable timing. I am in awe. I have no tools for socialization. The only thing I know how to do is be quiet and daydream. I want to learn from this boy. I don't even know his name, but I want him to be my first friend. Recess is my opportunity. But how does a short, fat daydreamer with no social skills at all make a friend? What am I good at? I always make my sister laugh when I copy our family members' behavior. Sometimes I copy their voices, sometimes their physical ailments and mannerisms. I'm actually a pretty good mimic. So I decided to copy him. And I did. Without following him too closely, I copied everything he did. Eventually, he went to the monkey bars. I followed. By the way, not only was this boy a skilled entertainer, he was also apparently training to be an Olympic gymnast. This was when the fun began. And he realized at this point that I was copying him. So now his movements became even more challenging. He was trying to trip me up, and he did. I lost my grip on the monkey bars, and the toes of my sneakers hit the ground and got stuck in the gravel below, and I fell forward into it. Splat! Face first. My two front teeth pierced through my bottom lip, and blood went everywhere. I ended up in the nurse's office, who asked me to call my mother, which I did. She asked me to be a big boy and wait. She assumed it was my daily tummy ache, and I was so disoriented, I neglected to tell her any different, believing, as always, that she would come. Eventually, while I waited, my teacher and the boy came to the nurse's office. He had been accused of pushing me. Of course, I told the truth, he had not. But he was so surprised I had not implicated him, he grinned and winked at me. Later, I found out he was routinely accused of nearly everything, often when he wasn't even in the room. He was a bad boy, and by association, I was guilty, and I was a bad boy too. I loved it. Being bad was so much better than being smart. I hid my intelligence all the way through elementary school and was never once sorry for it. I became a proud C student until junior high. When my mother finally arrived, she was shocked. I mean, she had no idea how seriously I had been hurt. It was clear the nurse, who didn't know I hadn't fully explained my injuries to my mother or that I manufactured a tummy ache every day, thought my mother deserved some sort of award for being the worst mother ever. Apologies, Mom. I later received 3 stitches and a scar I am still proud of to this day. I also had a best friend for the first time in my life.
Yay!
Thank you.
Yay! Woo! Awesome. Awesome. And your mother didn't come and pick you up. You got tough. You toughened up.
Tough luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. That is a great story, man. How many people can
Okay.
think back to getting injured on the playground? Oh, Amber typed a comment in the chat. As my mom always said, if it's broken today, it's broken tomorrow. Awesome. Hey, just a reminder, you guys can totally unmute, and that way everyone can hear you laugh or comment. Not a work meeting. Feel free to press the little icon of the microphone and unmute yourself. All right, Charles, thank you very much. We will keep rolling with storyteller number 2. Walei, please tell everyone a little bit about yourself and then take it away with your awesome story.
Absolutely. First of all, how's my camera right here? Is this good?
Perfecto.
Okay.
You.
Is this also good? Because this is more comfortable for me, but
Sure, can totally.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm looking down on you guys. Anyway.
Do it. Look
You
down.
are. That's the way it should be, right?
You should be comfortable.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for joining us. So my name is Walei. You can call me Wally if you'd like. And I was born in Egypt. I also identify as blind. And today, my story is about the one and only time I went driving. So as I said, I was born in Egypt. And when I was younger, I was progressively losing my vision. So, I didn't use a cane. I didn't have a guide dog or anything like that. So I kind of built up a reputation for myself around the neighborhood with the kids because I would do all these things that they just didn't really understand. We would be playing football, otherwise known as soccer here. And all the kids, would be perplexed as every single time the ball would roll right past me. And I would just kind of like stare at it like, that's a cool ball. It's both black and white. Look at that cool visual aesthetic as the colors alternate. It's hypnotizing. And the kids would be like, kick the ball. Or like, we'd be just hanging out as kids and one of the kids would point at something and I would see them. I would see their face and their expression and their arms and their shoulders and, move to their hand and their finger pointing. And I would be able to see that, but I wouldn't be able to connect it to the thing that they're pointing at. So my response would usually be something like, that's a cool pose. And they would be like, no, I'm pointing. Look, see, look, and my other response would probably be like, it looks like you're pointing at the entire hallway. Is that what you're pointing at? So that continued, and my family eventually moved to the States, and we moved to a suburban neighborhood here in Long Island, New York. My vision didn't get any better, so I kept building this reputation for myself in this new neighborhood as well. Especially during like things like gym class, right? The dreaded gym class.
Yeah.
Where we'd be playing. Just the backstory. My family, they were immigrants. They didn't know that they could do things like apply for accommodations or services for me as a student with a disability. So they just put me in regular gym class. So every time we'd be playing volleyball, I would be practicing standing there and looking pretty. That's what I was practicing. As the ball would fly right past me every single time. And there was, kids would get frustrated, especially this one kid. I don't know why, but he would he'd get so angry and like start yelling and cursing and like cursing, like we're in 6th grade. Like, like, is it that serious? We're not going to the championships. It's just gym class. But for some reason, it just got underneath the skin. So, I continued my reputation, building this reputation for myself until, so I was about 12 years old. And you can imagine, the terror that my neighbors felt when one day they see a car driving down the road and it's me behind the wheel. So it was a Saturday, and I had finished my chores, and my dad, tells me, like, let's go for a ride. And I'm like, cool, I'm thinking maybe we're going to go grocery shopping or get some candy. And I'm walking towards the car, and my dad says, no, not that side. The other side. The other side being the driver's side. And I'm like, are you sure, Dad? And he's like, yeah. And, I wasn't in the business of questioning my dad. Back in Egypt, we didn't really have things like freedom of speech or freedom of choice. So I was just like, okay. So I go and I get in the driver's seat, and I'm like, so what are we doing, Dad? And he's like, we're going driving. And I was like, cool, Dad. So he shows me the steering wheel and the foot pedals and all of that. And gets me familiarized. He showed me like how to put in the key and turn it, and all that fun stuff. And we, like as I said, we were in the suburbs, so it wasn't, the first good thing that we had going for us is we were in the suburbs, so there was not like a lot of traffic. So I slowly back down the driveway and get into the street. And I'm driving super slow. I could probably walk faster than I was driving. But, and my dad's giving me directions, and I'm just basically zigzagging down the street, like, going like, diagonally right until I'm almost hitting a car, and then diagonally left until I'm almost hitting a car, and then, repeat the process. And we drive down the block, and we turn around the corner. And as soon as we turn the corner, there was a group of kids playing in the street. And I had enough vision at the time. Like, I saw them and
I saw them.
and all that. And but then they saw me. And I can't, like, I still remember that image, in my head until this day. Like in horror movies or like in a Godzilla movie, when people first see Godzilla, that's how those kids looked at me. A 12-year-old blind kid behind the wheel of a white minivan driving at them. So of course they freak out, and they kind of scatter, and some of them trip, some of them like bump into stuff, but they're all yelling like, the blind kid is driving, head for the hills. So not before long, a crowd is gathering around, both parents and children. And I think that's about the point that my dad went, I think it's time to go home. Unfortunately, it was a dead end, so we couldn't just keep like loop around. We had to do like a complicated like 5-point turn technique or whatever those things are called.
Yeah.
And so like it's very slow and excruciating. Like I'm like backing up and turning, going forward and turning, backing up and turning, and the entire time they like that whole block is just like watching us, with those like, with that look on their face, like, we see you, Sabry. We're ready to call the cops as soon as you make some mistake. But thankfully, my dad and I made it out alive. No scratches on us, no scratches on the car, no scratches on other people or other cars. So we made it. We made it back home, and that was my one and only time driving.
You weren't even old enough to have a permit.
12?
Yeah, you can't get a permit until 14.
Apparently they do shit like that in Egypt. 12 is get them in a car.
12 is fine.
Oh no, that was Long Island.
That was Long Island.
But
See?
yeah, it was. But that, maybe my dad was taking the Egypt mentality with us.
Exactly.
I have a question. When you went to school the next day, were they snickering and pointing, or were they probably jealous? They're probably more jealous than anything, really.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because they went home and was like, Wally's dad let him drive, and he
exactly,
can't even
right? I ruined it for a lot of parents that day. But I can,
like you said, that's exactly it. This is Andrea. Totally, yeah.
and I can tell you guys that to date, my driving record is 100% accident free.
Better than most people.
Nice.
Yeah,
Oh,
Candace, is
wow.
yours accident free?
Oh no. I'm like I have more accidents than most normal people. Like I didn't have a good driving record until I moved to New York and didn't have to drive anymore.
Now she can hear James in the background. Now she tells me.
She tells me.
Well, on that note, it's actually time to introduce our next reader, and our next reader happens to hold the record for most accidents of anybody in this chat room. Please welcome Candace Davider to the stage.
Woo!
Yeah. Hi everybody, so good to see everybody. I grew up in California, and so our schoolyards in California are pretty massive. They're not as small as you have them here in New York by any stretch of the imagination. And they have a lot of different things going on. So I would go out into the playground. I was first grade. And when you go out into the playground, there's a bunch of handball courts. And then there's like monkey bars, there's some swings, and then there's a grassy area where people can play sports, and then there's a bunch of trees. And so me and a bunch of people would go meet by the tree and go listen to Carrie Gonzalez's older brother tell ghost stories. And it was a bunch of girls sitting around listening to him tell ghost stories. And all the girls were like, oh, Robbie Gonzalez. And at some point I got bored with that and all those other people. And I had wandered off and I had found some other friends. And I met this boy who was in the upper grades.
Ooh.
He was an upper grade boy. He was so cool. And he had a denim jacket, and he had that floppy kind of hair where, you know, boys think they're so cool and they flop their hair back and forth. He was just this bad upper grade boy, and we would go meet. So you had the monkey bars, and then they had these bars. It was just one thin bar, and the girls would get on them and spin around.
Yeah.
And they would spin on these bars. And so there was a bunch of them, but we would meet in the very background, the very far bar, so nobody could see us. And we would talk about things, and he would tell me things. And me with this upper grade boy, and we would talk. And one day he goes, do you know how to spell the word fuck? And I was like, no. And instantly I was like, I love that word. Instantly I knew that word had power, that it was bad, and it was awesome. And so I was sitting there and I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, fuck. I was like, is it an E? Is it an A? I don't know, because I didn't have phonics growing up. I was only 6. And in California, they weren't doing phonics, whatever. And he's like, I think at some point, he's like, I'm just going to tell you. So it's F-U-C-K. And I'm like, okay, fuck, F-U-C-K. So the bell rings, and I'm like sitting there with this powerful word. I know how to spell it. I know how to say it. And I'm walking with this powerful word embodied in my being. And I'm like, I'm going to do like I was walking, and everybody's kind of clearing out. And I found this stubby little pencil. I just saw it. I'm like, there's a stubby little pencil. I pick it up, and I'm like looking around. I'm going to write this word on the handball court. And I'm looking around. I'm 6. So in my 6-year-old mind, I'm going to take this stubby pencil, and I'm going to write this word on the handball court. I'm looking around, and the kids are lining up. They're going to their classrooms, but I'm like, I can make it. So I get to the handball court, and I crouch down, and I start, and I go, F-U-C, and the teacher comes and goes like, Candace Davider! I was like, it was Mrs. Hubble. Miss Hubble was my first grade teacher. She's the worst first grade teacher in the history of first grade teachers. She was old as dirt. She hated us. She was always mean. Oh, she was awful. That year she retired. That's how old she was. We were her last class, and she was so mean to us. And I dropped the pencil, and I was like, I didn't do it. And she's like, what are you writing? And I don't remember everything that happened after that, But I know she didn't call my mom that day, probably because she just couldn't be bothered with it. So she sat down with me and she's like, that's a very bad word. You're defiling school property, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. She's like, you have to write sentences, 100 sentences. I will not write bad words on the handball courts. And I had to do it during recess. I couldn't do it at home. I couldn't do it. And so all I remember is that I would sit there every recess with my little knees up and writing these sentences while everybody else got to play, and my little boyfriend was way in the back, probably finding some other first grader to hang out with, who knows. And I'm writing this. I will not write bad words on the handball courts. But when I was done with my 100 sentences, I thought it would be done, and it wasn't done. She's like, your mom has to sign this.
Oh.
My mom has to sign this? That's not happening. I'm not going to tell you. She's like, you have to tell your mother, Mrs. Hubble, who couldn't be bothered to tell my mother, has said, you have to go and have your mother sign this. My family is very conservative, very religious. I was like, my mom is not signing this. And I don't know what, I didn't enlist my older siblings. I couldn't think of anything. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. So I literally would go in and find something that had my mom's signature, and I was going to forge my mother's signature. My 6-year-old self is going to forge my mother's signature. I had a plan. I was like, I think I practiced it a few times and it never worked right. My mother had this beautiful, like, lovely cursive writing, and I'm 6. I can barely print my name, and I don't even know phonics. So it's a problem. So I think I even tried to trace it on something, and then I was like, I turned it in. I was like, that stuff looks great in my 6-year-old brain, and the teacher wasn't having any of it. Then she gave it to the principal, and then my mother came in. She was mortified. She was like, you don't understand. We're not these kind of people. We don't use that language in our house. And she didn't get that from us. And it was so funny because to this day, I've never heard my mother or my father actually use that word. But it is one of my favorite words.
Yay!
Yay!
And what a word it is.
Yay, Candace.
Woo!
Damn,
Yay.
girl, 6 years old.
Yay, Candace.
That is a young year. Oh, hey, special guest. Tell everyone who you are. Who's our special guest?
Wait. So there he is. He actually just left. That was my youngest son. He's 10, and he came in here right as Candace was telling. Oh, here he's back, telling her story. So he stayed to listen to Candace's story. But I can assure you, he has heard that word out of my mouth and many times.
You may have actually heard it from my mouth as well.
Yeah. So I'm not like horrified that he heard Candace tell a story because
For a second there, I was like, I know Candace sees a child, and I know you guys were BFFs. So clearly, you knew what you were doing there. So I had a second where I was concerned about the youth and the exposure. Awesome.
So now he knows, like, I didn't tell that story to my daughter.
You did or did not? Did not. Next time.
I don't feel like she needs to know that at 6-year-old, I was like 6, I was,
You can wait.
beginning my criminal career.
Something to look forward to later. A great story to tell. All right, Candace, awesome. Yay!
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys, let's keep the energy up. We have 2 more readers. Suzanne's going to read, and then I will close it all out and be the last reader. Without further ado, I'm very excited to meet my wonderful, fantastically funny storytelling friend, Suzanne Present. Suzanne, tell everybody a little bit about your story.
Okay, my story has to do with the show Dark Shadows. And for those of you who are not familiar with Dark Shadows, back in the late 1960s, every kid in America used to rush home to watch this show. It was a Gothic soap opera, and the basic premise of it, there was this rich family, the Collins family, that lived in a Victorian mansion in Maine. And unbeknownst to them, a lot of their relatives were werewolves and vampires and witches. It was like a great show. And I think it's like still on some cable channel. They keep repeating it every once in a while on different channels. And because of this show, I failed math. I was doing like terrible in math, so my mother got this math tutor for me who came like very highly recommended. So I would go over her house once or twice a week, and I was supposed to get an hour of math tutoring, except when I arrived at her house, I'd say, oh no, we have to watch Dark Shadows first. So the first half hour. And then after a while, my math tutor started getting addicted to this show. So for the second half hour, we had to sit and discuss Dark Shadows. So needless to say, there was very little math tutoring, and my mother never could figure out how come every other student of this tutor, their grades like went sky high, and I was still failing math. But anyway, when I wasn't at my math tutor's house watching Dark Shadows, I would watch it with my two good neighborhood friends, Ami and Vivian. Ami lived in my building and Vivian lived across the street. And we'd go to each other's houses all the time, but we usually watched it from my house. Because Ami's mother was a pianist. She worked for the off-Broadway show, The Fantastics, in the Sullivan Street Playhouse. So she was always playing the piano. And Vivian had two brothers who would always like barge in and bother us. So my house was the best house to watch Dark Shadows. Now, the cast of Dark Shadows was mainly adult, but there were two children in Dark Shadows, David Hennessy and the late Denise Nickerson, who you also might know. She was in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But anyway, both of them went to the school, the Professional Children's School, which is a school in New York for working children. So everyone that went there, they were like the actors or models or dancers or musicians. Now, Vivian went to that school too, although she was not a working child. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why she went to that school. And many years later, I kind of put it together. Her father was a concert violinist, and he was in this touring orchestra. So whenever they went out of town, he'd take the children with him. So the school kind of worked around children's schedules. So that's probably why she went to that school. Anyway, one day she casually dropped the bombshell to us that she was friends with Denise Nickerson. Well, like my mouth dropped and Ami's mouth dropped, and we got like all excited, like, oh, Vivian, could you introduce us to Denise? And sure, no problem. And that night, I don't think I slept a wink the whole entire night. I was so excited about this, and my imagination just ran wild. Said like, okay, I'm gonna meet Denise. She's gonna introduce me to the whole entire cast. They're gonna love me. I'm going to start hanging out with them. We're going to go to dinner. I'm going to go to their houses. I mean, they'll give me and Ami little parts in the show. Best of all, I was going to meet the cast member I had a crush on, who was David Selby, who played the tortured werewolf. He was tall, dark, and dangerous. And actually, I think every girl in America at that time had a crush on him, too. And funny enough, like much, much later, when I was in my 50s, I did get to meet David Selby, and I told him all about my childhood crush, and he smiled at me. He probably heard that 1,000 times before from 1,000 other women he met. But anyway, back to the story. So the next day, nothing really happened, and day by day went by, and we did not get introduced to Denise Nickerson. And Vivian always had some excuse or other. She would say, oh, Denise was sick. She didn't come to school today. She left early. She had a doctor's appointment. Oh, she didn't have to do taping for 2 weeks, so her family took off at Cape Cod. And after a while, Ami and I started talking privately about this, and we're going like, maybe she doesn't know Denise Nickerson. Maybe she's just making it up. I mean, yeah, they go to the same school, but a lot of kids go to that school. Maybe she just sees her in the hallway. She's lying about being her friend. So we start to really think unkindly about Vivian. Oh, she's a liar. She just wants to be the one with the power in our little group of friends. She's deceptive. And we gradually started drifting apart from her. And it was kind of sad because before that the three of us had been really tight. And now there was this thing between us. And I guess maybe we should have confronted Vivian, but we never did. Anyway, fast forward many years later, maybe 35, 40 years later, I'm an adult now and I'm going to my very first of many Dark Shadows conventions. For this one, Denise Nickerson herself was going to be there. And this time I was going to get to meet her because you meet the cast members at conventions. For those of you who have never been, they all sit at these tables, you line up. When it's your turn, you get their autographs, you get to take pictures with them, you get to chat with them. And to be honest, at that time, I'd completely forgotten about the whole incident with Vivian. And then suddenly, when I was maybe a few people away from meeting Denise, it popped into my head. And I said, you know, I'm going to name drop Vivian and see what she says. I want to know if she really knew Vivian. Yeah. So when it was my turn, I went over to her and I go, hi, Denise, my name is Suzanne. It's nice to meet you. Go, you know, I knew one of your school friends when I was growing up, Vivian Seichman. Well, her face just like lit up and she said, Vivian, wow, that's a blast from the past. How's Vivian doing? What's she doing now? How are Jonathan and Andrew? Those were her brothers. Is her dad still alive? And it's like, oh no, Vivian really did know Denise Nickerson and I was so mean to her. I felt terrible. Also, I had to admit to Denise, well, I haven't seen Vivian since college because after college I moved out of the neighborhood and I never saw anyone from my neighborhood again. So it's a little embarrassing. But anyway, after the convention, now I feel like a little bad about it and I wish there was some way I could apologize to Vivian. So Vivian, if you're out there, if you're even one of the people on this listening to this story, I'm sorry I judged you that way. And maybe I'll meet you at some Dark Shadows convention in the future and I can apologize to you in person.
To Vivian.
Wonderful.
Vivian.
Woo.
To Vivian.
Yes.
To Vivian.
We are going to find her. I drank all my wine or I would take a swig and we were going to get the story to her. I'm sure she's still holding a grudge too, so this should smooth things over real nice.
Hopefully.
Oh, thank you, Suzanne. All right, you guys got it in you for one last story? Moi?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I will not keep you in suspense. This story is about 6th grade, my favorite year of elementary school, and I will tell you why. Lots of stuff happened in 6th grade, guys, so strap in. 6th grade. Were you a girl growing up in the late 70s? What brands do you remember? What did you wear? Were you wearing makeup yet? Did you play an instrument in the school band? Were you popular? A little bit about 6th grade Andria. I wasn't popular. I wasn't rich. My parents were not important people, but I also wasn't a nerd. I didn't have braces yet or a bad reputation. And I had Mrs. Witten. She had my brother. So she was really going to get me and I could finally be myself in school. My school was full of fashionable girls. In 1982, designer jeans were still new. Jordache was #1 for girls. Dickies were the most popular pants. You guys remember Dickies? They came in all kinds of bold colors, unisex pants for girls or boys. Barrettes were a status item. And if you had long hair, you wore barrette jewelry, like a combo of a barrette and a dangling earring. Those were popular in my elementary school. Bonnie Bell lip gloss rollers. Remember those guys? Glass tubes that fit in your pocket with flavored gloss applied by rolling the metal ball on your lips around and around. Most popular flavor back then was watermelon. But I had none of those things. I didn't even have pierced ears yet. I wore ill-fitting, mismatched clothing, and I had no opinion about my hair. It was short and unsettled, and I absolutely can remember going to school most days without even looking in the mirror to comb it. My parents left for work before I walked to school, so I would watch Tom and Jerry cartoons until the last possible minute instead of grooming in the mirror. And for proof about my overall look, see my 6th grade class photo on Facebook. It is undeniably me, and I know because I've posted on Facebook and everyone has easily picked me out. Hello Kitty scented erasers. Little notepads and keepsake items that were too small or precious to use for conversation pieces showed off during breaks before or after recess. Which was your favorite, Hello Kitty or one of her friends in the collection, My Melody or Little Twin Stars? I was able to convince my mom that I had to have these items to survive in school. They were sold in the Hallmark store in the strip mall. Erasers, so many erasers. Mom, all the cool kids have these, I cried. One little eraser is just 35 cents. Now they could go up to $1 for the larger ones with a plastic cap, but I wasn't even asking for those, even though of course I wanted them all. I also wanted the doll-sized tubes of Hello Kitty toothpaste, Hello Kitty Band-Aids, and the Hello Kitty letter writing set where the pencil and envelopes were small enough to fit in your pocket. I didn't even dream of asking for the inconceivably expensive larger items like Hello Kitty radio, hair dryer, or a diary with a real lock. Mom, I will walk to the store and use my allowance. Just let me get these. Andria, why do you want to buy one eraser so small when you could go to Faye's drugstore and I can buy twice as many for half the price? But Mom, I don't want twice as many. I wanted a pink eraser that smelled like bubble gum or banana, guys. And I needed to buy these as birthday gifts too. I couldn't give someone a drugstore pack of pencils from Faye's. Come on. But Mom thought, like clothes, that no one noticed the difference without the label. But of course, they did. So making do with off-brand items halfway through 6th grade, I was crushing it with straight A's. I fell in love with ancient civilizations, particularly the Sumerians in the ancient city of Ur, and the TV show MASH. I had a 3-ring binder for my subjects and a diary, well, not a real diary with a lock, but a Faye's drugstore spiral notebook that I decorated with stickers, which was still a safe repository where I could write love letters to Hawkeye Pierce, played Alan Alda, the star of MASH. Other girls that year were swooning over Matt Dillon and 21 Jump Street, but I would hot gossip over MASH reruns with my aunt, who was old enough to be with my grandmother. So I had gotten my flute back that December and was back in concert band after spending the fall without one because my father didn't want to rent it from Pete's music store again. That's another story. Even though I loved the flute, practiced it, and was pretty good at it, my dad decided, fuck that guy. Yep, fuck that guy, because Pete's had raised the price and my father was taking a stand against it at my expense. So I spent the first month of 6th grade really depressed without a flute to play in school band. So my dad got me a keyboard at a garage sale. Well, that's what I told my friends because it sounded more normal. Let me explain. Thursday nights were auction nights. My parents found something in common and took a break from hating each other to go to weekly auctions, buy useless crap, and fill up the garage. My bedroom furniture that looked like it came from a gothic Edgar Allan Poe hotel, auction. So one Thursday night, when I heard the car pull into the garage, Dad came into my bedroom, back from the hunt. I bought you this. What is it? It looks like a box of piano keys. It weighed a ton. It's an organ. You can play this. You wanted an organ, right? You were sick of the flute. No, I wasn't. I said I liked the flute. Well, play this then. But I couldn't play it in band. But I decided it was better than nothing. So after months of playing the shit out of the organ, I put the ad in the penny saver, and I found a used flute to buy, and my dad, impressed with my initiative-taking skills, actually paid for it. So now that I was back in business of being the king of 6th grade with my flute, I decided to press on to get some slightly better clothing. I really did ask for so little, guys. I never got adorable strawberry shortcake dolls for Christmas. Guys, remember strawberry shortcake dolls? Because my mom said, couldn't you just dab some almond oil onto a doll? But Mom, they smell like strawberry and they have matching red hair and clothes. This is my cross to bear. I couldn't have nice things. I also got a Cindy doll. I didn't even realize it was a Barbie doll knockoff until my best friend brought over her Barbie dolls, of which she had many. And she looked at my Cindy doll and said, why does Barbie have such a big head? And then I realized it was true. The doll looked like it was taking heavy doses of medication. It was a Barbie knockoff, and I only had one. But that's the doll I had. Remember the auctions? So my father brought me home a huge wooden dollhouse one day. Not a pink plastic Barbie dream house, but the kind of dollhouse built in a garage by someone who's probably never played with dolls but wanted to in the secrecy of their garage, and then they died. And then my dad bought it at an auction. So it was kind of creepy. And I was too old to play with it, but I was embarrassed by it, and I still had to appear grateful. Yes, because my parents, as first-generation immigrants, could not see the American hype over brand names and fads. Every Christmas, they'd remind us of how lucky they were if they got one pair of shoes that year that was their size, because they had to wear their siblings' hand-me-down shoes that weren't even the same size. In some years, they only got underwear for Christmas. So I asked for little, and I wore the cheap department store clothes, and I laughed along when the school teased the other kids wearing shittier clothes, just grateful that I had been spared. That is, until my parents decided they would do the worst possible thing. Worse than not buying brand names. Buying brand names on sale. I remember those yellow Dickies like it was yesterday. Mom took me to Herb Phillipson's Army and Navy store in a strip mall where there was not a single goods store. I tried on a pair of Dickies. They had the tiny, almost invisible tag that proved they were Dickies, but they were bright yellow. She made me buy them and wear them. Look, now you have Dickies. They fit good. But I wasn't excited to have the pants. I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. It wasn't. Everyone called me Ronald McDonald that day. I went home with my head hung low, and I begged them never to make me wear them again. Then there were the fake Lee jeans. My dad found a leather Lee label on the ground somewhere and brought it home. They said, why don't we sew this onto a pair of regular no-name jeans? No one will know. Yes, they did. Everyone knew. Someone said, hey, did you sew a Lee label onto your jeans? What am I going to reply? Yes, because I don't follow fashion trends. I can think for myself. I mean, the worst part was trying to defend the honor of Lee jeans, which were the worst brand name next to Wrangler, and they weren't even cool. Then that same year, that summer, a pair of Nike sneakers. Ooh, pretty exciting, Nikes. But you see, that year, the nylon Nikes were all the rage. Reebok high tops had come onto the scene, so Nikes weren't even the best that you could do. So at Klein's All Sports in the mall, the rough canvas Nikes that were not a hit that year were cheaper than the no-name sneakers, so why not get the Nikes? Very good sneakers. But I knew they were wrong. They had to be nylon, and they weren't even comfortable. So when my parents asked if I wanted to just cut off the stripe and try to sew it onto another pair of sneakers, I gave up. I rode my knockoff brand, hand-me-down dirt bike around that lonely, sweaty, sticky summer, and I enjoyed my last summer of childhood.
Yay! Have you ever owned another pair of yellow pants ever again?
No more yellow pants. It was the end of colored pants for me.
So
I didn't even
Andrea,
have white pants.
I have to say, I only had a Cindy doll. I had one Cindy doll.
You had one.
Right, because we weren't allowed to have Barbie because my mom thought it would give us a bad complex. And then one year for Christmas, my aunt, who hates my mother, sent me and my sisters all Barbie dolls. But by then we were too old to play with them, and like our stupid Cindy doll, right?
I feel greatly relieved that someone else had a Cindy doll because I didn't think anyone would believe me, that they would think I was just making this up. And frankly, I never knew anyone since that had a Cindy doll. So you had.
Oh yeah, we had them. We had them. My cousins all had Barbies and like tons of Barbie clothes, and like Barbie would get boob jobs under the couch, but we weren't allowed to have any of that. We could because like it would give us a bad body image and a bad body complex, and yeah. So we had a Cindy doll, and my mother also, when we had like other baby dolls, she would never get me a blonde one. She'd always get me one with red hair, and so I thought my mother didn't love me.
Wow, interesting.
But, you know, I had a great childhood, so I'm not complaining.
Yes. Yes. Do you, just curiously, but do you remember that Cindy had like a big giant fat head? Like it was taking beds?
I just remember she was homely. Like Barbie had like perfect skin and really long hair, and Cindy is like homely.
Yeah,
right?
Cindy had really bad hair. That's what I remember. She had like really bad hair.
Yeah.
I remember when I was young, before my dad was here before us, when we were back in Egypt.
Yeah.
And I wrote him a letter, and I wanted a cap. Do you guys remember Captain Planet?
Yeah.
By any chance? Is like a superhero and fights pollution. And I wanted a Captain Planet action figure. And my dad instead sent me a Predator action figure.
Ooh.
Like the alien.
Yeah, I was like, that's a little different.
Yeah.
I know, I'm trying to think of.
Although that could be worth a lot of money now.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I still have that.
It's funny because, you know, lots of men, like adult men, collect stuff like that.
I know, right? Yeah. Actually, I shouldn't really say. I have sculptures. They're not like action figures, but I have sculptures of like comic book villains and heroes and stuff.
Yeah.
Men are always saying how they don't have action figures. It's a common.
But they don't have dolls.
No dolls, no action figures. Something else.
No dolls, yeah.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you all very much. Have a good one. Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank